privilege to moderate this discussion and conversation with some of the elders of our fraternity, Pi Lambda Phi. The men you see up here really represent the core leadership of our fraternity over the last half century. And I'm not trying to rub it in, George.
Thank you.
But it is such a privilege for us to be here and to get to know these men even better. And we're recording this so that future generations of our brothers can also get to know these elders and these icons of Pi Lambda Phi. Bennett Silverman, tell us about your career, your life, and your association with Pi Lambda Phi.
Well, I too grew up in Brooklyn and decided to go to Columbia College once they admitted me. And I had a fear at that time of being what the Charles Atlas ads of that era described as a 98-pound weakling. I wasn't of my current girth at that moment. And the first day of school, there was one extracurricular that started, and that was the rowing team, the crew. And so I went out for the crew, and I determined not to become a 98-pound weakling, but more muscular than that. I enjoyed rowing, and I enjoyed the camaraderie of the group that went out with me. And so, as many of you may well imagine, studies are a key part of your experience at Columbia. And so with crew and studies, I really had little time for fraternity. But one of my three roommates freshman year joined Beta Sigma Rho, which is one of the component fraternities of Pi Lambda Phi today. And he asked me at that time, would I consider joining with him? And I think I may have gone to what we used to call as a smoker at that time. And I didn't pursue the fraternity freshman year at all. Second year, I'm sitting on the stoop of our dormitory when Wally Katz, my freshman year roommate, walks by and he says, Bennett, if you're still thinking of joining a fraternity, tonight's the last night of rush. You'd better get down there. Well, I'm really good at the last moment, doing things. So I went down to the chapter house. It was then an apartment on 108th Street. And rushed, was rushed, was given a bid. An interesting aside with regard to that, once I was a new member, then called a pledge. I was given the job of being a bartender for a Saturday night party. And I quite cleverly, I thought, asked them, what time does the party begin? And they said the show will end at 10 o'clock and we'll be back at the house shortly thereafter. And so I started drinking a half hour before they were supposed to be back, because once I was going to be a bartender, I'd have no time to serve myself. And, well, the show was delayed, and when they returned to the house, I was lying on the floor. They dragged me back to my dorm room, they put me to bed for the night. The next morning, they came to de-pledge me, but I couldn't be awakened. So they left me there. And they didn't think ahead, because that afternoon was parents' reception, and my parents were there. And then I walked into the apartment, the fraternity apartment, and they felt the moment had passed to de-pledge me. So I am here today, the beneficiary of that. In between, I've been a lawyer, specializing in international trade matters, and I, on a half-time basis, continue in that realm.
And where's your home?
My home is about 20 miles north of New York City in a town called Hastings-on-Hudson.
All right. Were you at the wedding last week?
No, one of my friends was supposed to be there. He wangled a job as a greeter at the wedding, but at the last moment, the cost-cutting effort cut his job, and no, I was not at the wedding.
Bennett, why, as an initiated brother of Beta Sigma Rho, have you dedicated your life to Pi Lambda Phi?
The answer is actually quite clear. It's because of what fraternity did for me that I want to give back and have it do for others. It's amazing to me the fortuitousness of life. So I was a sophomore pledge at Beta Sigma Rho at Columbia, and towards the end, must have been winter time of my first year in the fraternity, my sister and I were speaking on the telephone, and she said, "Have you ever given thought to becoming an officer?" And I said, "No, I really never had." So she said, "Well, what do they need, and do you want to do that?" And I said, "Well, let me think about it." And so election time came in the spring, and I circulated my name as available to be social chair because the social program of the chapter was not so terrific, and I thought I could make a big improvement, if you will. I think I did make a big improvement. One of the interesting stories, sidelight, how do you get guys to go to theater, to dinner, to parties in New York? Well, they're expensive. Well, so you subsidize them. And when the chapter became aware of what I was doing in the way of subsidies, some of the people started complaining, to which I responded, "Well, your only way to get your fair share of your dues is to come to the parties, is to come to the theater, to come to Mama Leone's at that time was one of our favorite restaurants we'd go to." I said, "Then I'll pick up half the bill, and you'll pay the other half of the bill. So that's how you'll get your fair share of your fraternity dues." My term as social chair was coming to an end at the next elections, and they opened nominations for Rex of the chapter. And a guy totally unexpected to me nominates me, saying there's no one who's done more for the chapter in the past year than Bennett. Gabe Pinsky nominated me to be Rex of the chapter. And then the guy who was the presumed next Rex got nominated by someone else, and we were asked to leave the room while we made a presentation. They had a discussion without us present. I got elected. And as Rex of the chapter, I think I did a lot of organizing on the financial side. I did a lot of proactive things in the programming of chapter activities. And I learned how to manage people. I learned skills that I call both civics and fraternal. And it is because, as I say, of what fraternity did for me, that through the vehicles available to me, Pi Lambda Phi, I want to pass this on to succeeding generations of people. Fraternity is great. In my opinion, it is the biggest civics lesson you ever have. And why? It's because you can have a fight today, but you can't leave tomorrow. You got to be back in the house. And most of the clubs you join, you can have a fight and leave. Fraternity, they come chasing you tomorrow. So that's why I've been active in Pi Lambda Phi.
As you reflect on all the years you've been a part of this brotherhood, what's been your proudest moment?
Well, two moments come to mind, and they are not such momentous events, although at its time, each one had a great meaning to me and to the fraternity. The first is when an independent fraternity at Austin, Texas, UT there, sought to join Pi Lambda Phi. And they were approximately 97% Jewish. And one of the concerns at the Pi Lambda Phi executive level was, how can they be 97% Jewish and meet our creed, which we felt was of greatest importance, the highest level. And so at that time, I was president of the fraternity, and Fred Dobbins, what was his title in the church?
Deacon.
Deacon in the Catholic Church, was my vice president. And I said, Fred, you and I are going down to interview that chapter, and would you please wear your clerical collar when you come? I said, we're going to find out how these guys react. And Fred said, you don't have to worry about me wearing my clerical collar. He says, whenever I fly on an airplane, I wear my clerical collar because I get a reduced rate. And so the two of us flew down to Austin, and together with the executive director at the time, we interviewed the chapter, and I had Fred made an appropriate number of remarks on the creed and its meaning to the fraternity. And then publicly I asked if there were any questions, comments about our presentation, and there were none. And following that, we made a private inquiries amongst, as you're shaking hands and live with our creed, do you feel supportive of the creed? We got such a positive response that we took them in as a Pi Lam chapter. Now, the most interesting part of my answer comes that the following year, they elected one of their 3 non-Jewish members as rex of their chapter. So I knew we sold the right group. That was right. The second story that I have to tell relates to the very same Len Jeffries that Andy referred to a few moments ago. Len Jeffries, 20 years ago, is that when we had the active discussions about him? Len Jeffries was a prolific anti-Jewish author. And if you read his materials, they were incendiary. And some of the brothers of the fraternity, the proper number, submitted a petition to expel Len Jeffries for exhibiting conduct that was not in accord with our creed. And I again appointed Fred. I turned to him and appointed him to make a study of the articles and what had been written. And Fred's report was that in his opinion, or the opinion of his committee, this was not sufficient to warrant expulsion, and that was the final resolution of the council. The motion to expel was defeated, and that's my second moment. Both of them, as you see, relating to our creed.
I wonder if each of you would just take a few moments, looking ahead. What advice and guidance do you wish to extend to the current brotherhood and to future members of this fraternity to ensure that it continues and it continues to be vibrant and be true to its original values?
The answer is really consonant with my telling you why I have been active in Pi Lambda Phi. I have a mission to help the new generations of fraternity brothers to develop themselves individually and collectively in their chapters, and the relevance of our creed cannot be overstated. I don't believe that we are today, each chapter, each brother, paying sufficient attention to being a proselytizer of our creed. And I challenge each of the chapters and brothers to be much more active, to, as I suggested before, to make plans, to develop programs that are constant and develop and make our creed progress as the years go by. This is something that I think in each generation has to be renewed, and I pass on to the brothers as advice to put in that programming effort and accomplish that renewal.